Let's take a deep breath and rewind. Back to a small garage in Los Altos, California. Back to 1976. Back to the birth of one of the most valuable companies in the world, Apple. But Apple's story isn't just about iPhones and iPads. It's a tale of visionaries, betrayals, brilliant marketing, how one company reshaped technology, communication, and even human behavior. Let's dive deep into the real, untold history of Apple Inc. And along the way, we'll uncover 30 jaw-dropping facts that will forever change how you look at that bitten Apple logo. 1. Apple was born in a garage. But that's not the full story. We've all heard it. Apple started in a garage. And while that's technically true, the reality is that most of the serious work didn't happen in the garage. It happened in Steve Jobs' bedroom and at coffee shops. The garage was more like a symbol, a cultural myth of startup hustle. But what's real is that Jobs, Wozniak, and Ron Wayne founded Apple with barely $1,300. That tiny investment would eventually become a $3 trillion empire. 2. Apple's first computer was hand-built by one man. The Apple I wasn't mass-produced in factories. It was hand-built by Steve Wozniak. He literally soldered each circuit board by himself. Only about 200 units were ever made, and they sold for $666.66. Not for satanic reasons, but simply because Wozniak liked repeating numbers. Today, those original Apple I units are sold at auctions for hundreds of thousands of dollars. 3rd, Ron Wayne sold his 10% share for $800. There was a third co-founder of Apple, Ron Wayne. He created Apple's first logo and wrote their first contract, but he didn't like risk. Just 12 days after founding the company, he sold his 10% stake for only $800. If he had held on to that 10%, it would be worth over $250 billion today. He once said, "I made the best decision I could at the time." That's history for you, sometimes painful. 4. The Apple logo had Isaac Newton sitting under a tree. Before the clean, minimalist bitten Apple, Apple's first logo featured Isaac Newton sitting under an apple tree with a quote about gravity. Steve Jobs thought it was way too complex. So in 1977, they hired designer Rob Janoff, who came up with the simple apple silhouette with a bite taken out. Why the bite? To make sure people didn't mistake it for a cherry or tomato. 5. The rainbow Apple logo was a rebellion. The rainbow-colored Apple logo wasn't just pretty. It was a rebellious message. In an era of boring beige computers, Apple wanted to be seen as vibrant, human, and creative. The rainbow also reflected Apple's new feature. The Apple II was one of the first computers to display color. It was a small logo with a loud message. Apple thinks different. 6. Apple nearly went bankrupt in the 1990s. Here's something wild. Apple almost died. In the mid-90s, it was losing money fast, products were flopping, Microsoft was dominating. In 1997, Apple was just 90 days away from bankruptcy. That's when they made the bold decision to bring back Steve Jobs, who had been fired 12 years earlier. And guess what happened next? A complete rebirth. 7. Microsoft saved. Apple, yes, Microsoft, Apple's greatest rival, helped save Apple. When Jobs returned in 1997, he made a shocking announcement. Microsoft was investing $150 million in Apple. Why? To avoid antitrust lawsuits and keep competition alive. Bill Gates appeared via satellite at an Apple event, and the crowd booed. But this move gave Apple the cash it needed to survive. 8. Steve Jobs didn't invent the iPhone. We often think of Jobs as the sole genius behind Apple's products. But he didn't invent the iPhone or the iPod. Those were team efforts by brilliant engineers like Tony Fadell, Scott Forstall, and Jony Ive. Jobs' real gift was his vision and taste. He could see 5 to 10 years into the future, and more importantly, he knew what to say no to. 9. The iPod wasn't the first MP3 player. Believe it or not, Apple didn't invent the MP3 player. There were many before it. What made the iPod revolutionary was its design, storage capacity, and seamless integration with iTunes. The phrase 1,000 songs in your pocket was a game changer. Within a few years, Apple owned 70% of the digital music market. The iPhone changed everything, even the world. When Apple launched the iPhone in 2007, it didn't just create a new phone. It reshaped society. Multi-touch, mobile apps, and internet on the go became standard. Today, more people use the internet on smartphones than computers. The iPhone also disrupted entire industries. cameras, GPS, video games, newspapers, and even the taxi business. 11. Apple has more cash than most countries. Apple has over $60 billion in cash reserves. That's more than the GDP of over 100 countries. It could literally buy entire nations. In fact, Apple could buy Disney, Netflix, or Tesla right in full and still have money left. 12. Apple stores make more money per square foot than Tiffany & Co. Apple's retail stores are architectural marvels, and their sales numbers are insane. They generate more revenue per square foot than any other retailer on Earth, including luxury brands. That glowing Apple logo on a glass cube? It's a magnet for both sales and selfies. 13. Apple's marketing is a psychological masterpiece. Apple doesn't sell features, it sells feelings. Instead of specs, it talks about how you'll feel when using the product. Their ads are minimalist, their launches are theatrical, they turn customers into fans and fans into evangelists. 14. Apple products are designed for ecosystem lock-in. Ever noticed how easy it is to airdrop, sync photos, or use iMessage? That's by design. Apple's ecosystem is so smooth it's hard to leave. Once you buy an iPhone, you're more likely to buy a MacBook, then an iPad, then AirPods. That's how Apple keeps customers loyal and profits high. 15. Apple buys a company. Every few weeks, Apple has quietly acquired over 100 companies, often without telling the public. These acquisitions include AI companies, security startups, and chip manufacturers. Some of these purchases directly lead to features like Face ID, Siri improvements, and custom Apple silicon. 16. Apple almost called itself Executech or Matrix Electronics. Before settling on the name Apple, Steve Jobs and Wozniak brainstormed a bunch of other names, including boring corporate ones like Executech and Matrix Electronics. Jobs, a fan of simplicity and a recent visitor to an Apple orchard, suggested Apple Computer. Why? Because it sounded fun, spirited, and not intimidating. Plus, it would appear before Atari in the phone book, a subtle dig at Jobs' former employer. The name Apple was playful, human, and unintimidating. Exactly what tech wasn't at the time. 17. Apple once made a digital camera. In 1994, Apple launched the QuickTake 100, one of the first consumer digital cameras. It was ahead of its time, able to take 8 photos at 640 by 480 resolution. But here's the kicker, it failed. People just weren't ready for digital photography. Apple discontinued the line in 1997. Ironically, today the iPhone's camera is one of its most powerful selling points, and Apple is now the most used camera brand in the world. Without technically making a camera? 18. Apple designed a game console. But it flopped in the mid-90s. Apple partnered with Bandai to launch the Apple Pippin, a gaming console that ran on Mac OS. It was Apple's attempt to enter the gaming market, but the Pippin was too expensive and lacked games. It sold under 50,000 units before being scrapped. Today, it's a collector's item and a reminder that even Apple has had epic flops. 19th. Johnny Ive was the secret behind Apple's design revolution. While Steve Jobs got the credit, Johnny Ive was the man behind Apple's most iconic designs. From the iMac to the iPhone, Ive's obsession with minimalism, curves, and materials gave Apple its distinctive look. Jobs and Ive worked so closely that Jobs once said, "If I had a spiritual partner at Apple, it's Joni." His work has shaped not only Apple, but the entire tech industry's design language. 20. The Apple Watch outsold the entire Swiss watch industry. In 2019, the Apple Watch alone outsold all Swiss watches combined, including Rolex, Omega, and Tag Heuer. Think about that. A tech company beat an industry that had existed for over a century. Apple didn't just enter the smartwatch space, it owned it, turning wearables into a major business category worth billions. 21. Apple's chips are now entirely in-house. For decades, Apple relied on Intel and others to power its computers. But in 2020, Apple launched the M1 chip, its first processor built entirely in-house. The results were staggering: faster speeds, better battery life, and tighter software integration. Apple's control over hardware and software is now nearly total. 22. Steve Jobs was inspired by calligraphy. After dropping out of college, Jobs sat in on a calligraphy course at Reed College. It seemed useless at the time, but later it shaped the typography of the Macintosh. That's why Apple computers were the first to have beautiful fonts and typesetting. It wasn't about utility, it was about taste. Jobs always believed in combining technology with the humanities. 23. Apple was the first to remove the headphone jack. In 2016, Apple killed the headphone jack on the iPhone 7. The backlash was massive. Critics called it arrogant, but Apple was looking ahead. Removing the jack allowed for more space inside the phone, better water resistance, and the push toward wireless, setting the stage for AirPods, which are now among the best-selling tech accessories in history. 24. Apple pays. Nearly no taxes. Compared to its size, Apple uses complex global tax structures to legally avoid paying billions in taxes. At one point, they had over $200 billion stored offshore to avoid U.S. taxes. Investigations and political backlash followed, but Apple continued to operate within loopholes. It's a controversial topic: how the world's richest company can contribute so little compared to what it earns. 25. Apple was sued for slowing down older iPhones. In 2017, Apple admitted it had secretly slowed down older iPhones to preserve battery life. The backlash was brutal. People felt betrayed, lawsuits followed, and Apple eventually paid a $500 million settlement in the US alone. They also added battery health indicators and gave users the option to disable throttling. But the incident damaged trust, a reminder that even Apple isn't perfect. 26. Apple secretly works on cars and healthcare. Apple's ambitions go far beyond phones. Internally, they've been working on Project Titan, a secret car project rumored to involve autonomous vehicles. Simultaneously, Apple is investing heavily in healthcare. From the Apple Watch's ECG features to potential diagnostic apps, Tim Cook once said Apple's greatest legacy might be in health, not tech. 27. The iPad was almost an iPhone. Before the iPhone, Apple was already working on a tablet-like device. But when Jobs saw the touchscreen prototype, he realized it would be perfect for a phone. The iPad was delayed while they built the iPhone first. When the iPad finally launched in 2010, it created an entirely new category, tablets, and sold over 300,000 units on day one. 28. Apple's campus costs. Over $5 billion. Apple Park, the circular spaceship campus in Cupertino, cost over $5 billion to build. It's one of the most advanced corporate headquarters in the world, powered by 100% renewable energy, with walls made entirely of custom glass. It was Steve Jobs' final product before his death, a legacy monument to Apple's culture of perfection. 29. Apple was the first company to hit $3 trillion in market cap. On January 3, 2022, Apple became the first company in history to reach a $3 trillion valuation. That's more than the entire GDP of France. Think about it. A company that started in a garage now worth more than most nations. That milestone solidified Apple's place as the most successful business the world has ever seen. 30. Apple changed the way we live, work, and think. It's not just about devices. Apple changed how we communicate, take photos, listen to music, track our health, navigate the world, pay for things, and even interact with other humans. Every product wasn't just a gadget, it was a cultural shift. Whether you're an Apple fan or critic, one thing is undeniable. Apple reshaped modern life. From a garage in California to the top of the global economy, Apple's story is one of ambition, rebellion, risk-taking, and vision. It's easy to forget just how many ways Apple changed our lives, until you look back. It wasn't just the iPhone, or the Mac, or the Apple Watch. It was the idea that tech could be elegant, that simplicity could be powerful, and that a company could design not just products, but entire experiences. And now the world watches every time Apple holds an event. Every product launch becomes a global headline. Every move shifts markets. That's more than business. That's legacy. If you found these facts eye-opening, hit that like button to support more deep-dive documentaries like this. Got a favorite Apple moment we didn't cover? Drop it in the comments below as we read every single one. And if you want to keep exploring the hidden stories behind the world's biggest brands, Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a drop. The next episode might just blow your mind. Until then, stay curious.